Okay, it's right about that time, so let's go ahead and get started. Today we're going to quickly show you a little bit about a new particulate identification database tool that we think could help many pharmaceutical companies with foreign particulate and root cause investigations. Before we get started, there's just a couple housekeeping items. You should be hearing me now, and if your audio clarity is poor, you have two options. One is through your computer, but if that isn't working, you can also just dial in. Click no audio on the right of your screen and use the phone number sent to you from RJ Lee Group at 1 p.m. Eastern Time today. It should have come in an hour ago. You are already muted, so don't worry about muting your line. Everyone will be muted through the course of the webinar today, but you can ask questions at any time by using the question function on your GoToWebinar panel at the right of your screen. In the question feature, only myself, the moderator, will see what's being typed, and I'll get to as many questions for the presenter as possible. We'll do those at the end of the presentation. Also, in that GoToWebinar panel to the right, I've attached two handouts. You won't need them for the presentation, but they're informational on ParticleID. So one is an informational brochure, and the other is a little more technical, and it describes security, capabilities, and support available for ParticleID. So let's get started. We could talk about the physical features of ParticleID all day, but don't take our word for it, because we're lucky enough to have one of our ParticleID customers giving a testimonial instead. Our customer presenting is Dave Exline, the president at Gateway Analytical. Gateway Analytical is a company of experts that provide chemical and materials analysis solutions for healthcare, forensics, materials, and predictive maintenance applications. Dave is going to talk about the labor hours that Gateway Analytical will save in 2021 with ParticleID, how it increases their searchability, and how FPM investigations have gone quicker. Dave will actually show how he uses the tool to mine data over multiple projects, how we add samples, classify samples, and uses filters through various analytical data. Another FYI, by the end of this week, I'll email you the webinar so you can go back and watch it again or share it with a colleague. And heads up that after the webinar, a survey will pop up. Please take 30 seconds. Just let us know what you thought about it. We would love your feedback. So thanks, everyone, for bearing with me with these housekeeping items. I'd now like to introduce Dave Exline. Thank you, Dave, for being a first user of ParticleID and for sharing your honest feedback with this group today. The floor is all yours.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Appreciate that very much. Today, I want to really talk about the value of a ParticleID database, how it increases productivity, but also a lot of the basis of why one would want to use something like this, some of the regulatory background with it, as well as the need to be able to customize and be able to use this type of information. So we'll just jump into it here. So the agenda really is to discuss why particulate matter defect databases are a critical need in industry. And this industry is within pharmaceutical, biopharmaceutical, medical device, as well as material science. We're going to look at different categories and common types of particulate matter, looking at the particulate management life cycle, key functions of a particulate matter defect database, and then we're really going to talk about the value of a robust particulate matter defect database, and kind of from a money savings standpoint, but also a time and efficiency saving standpoint. So we'll try to review those as well as we move through it. So as a critical need for industry, if you were to look at different types of guidance documents, especially the one on the right here, USP 790, it certainly calls out the need for being able to identify and characterize different types of visible particulate. And the real value of a particulate matter defect database relies on its ability to mine information, add information, but also kind of keep all of this together so that at the end of the day, we can find not only identifying different types of particulate and defects, but also some source or method of source determination. So these can affect finished pharmaceutical products, raw materials, primary packaging, as well as single-use systems. But the idea is that some sort of a particle matter database is critical for continuous process improvement, with whether you're within pharmaceuticals or medical device or even material science for that matter. So the industries affected, typically we see a lot and do a lot in the pharmaceutical, biopharmaceutical, cell and gene therapy. As we progressed in cell and gene therapies become more mature, we start looking at the same types of particle characterizations and some of the requirements that have historically been part of pharmaceutical and biopharmaceutical. So as cell and gene therapy products mature, the need to identify particulate, be able to database them, be able to understand source determination and remediate those issues is going to be critical over the next 5 to 10 years, making something like a database very important. Also medical devices and really any type of high technology manufacturing, whether we're talking about additive manufacturing or higher end analytical products that may have very small contaminants that may affect the end use of a product. All of these types of things make databasing important. And when we talk really about the importance, we're talking about if we deal with 1, 2, 3 different products or types of investigations, those can be handled, kind of shuffling around reports and looking through those. But when you start to do hundreds of investigations, 500, 1,000, 2,000, and then over several years, like our laboratory, we deal with thousands every year. Over years, we've 10, 20,000 different types of investigations that we have to kind of cross-reference. So a lot of this becomes really important to have some mechanism to go through these. So from a science perspective, analytical testing is a critical component of any type of investigation, and multi-analytical methods are critical. There's no turnkey analytical test to identify a material and what its potential source might be. This typically needs to be done using a multi-analytical method, applying different analytical techniques such as optical microscopy, FTIR, Raman, SEM, taking all of that information and then comparing that to unknown sources to try to figure out what a potential source might be. And these are typical of forensic investigations, and that's really at our laboratory what we apply. Also, when you look at a quality perspective, a quality by design process, essentially you're trying to identify source materials at the beginning of a process, and that enables you to be much more effective when a problem arises, so you know where particles could have come from within the system and within the product. And this is a really critical type of perspective to take on for any type of a company. And a database is critical for this because you're able to archive all of your known materials at the beginning, and then it's very easily searchable when you do have to get involved in an investigation. And then there's also the big data implications for the 21st century. We're talking about a lot of scientific data, spectroscopy data, text data, a lot of information that comes off of analytical equipment. All of this needs to be in a format to be able to store, but also in a compliant environment, a 21 CFR 11 compliant environment, a GMP compliant environment, especially as we deal in the pharmaceutical, biopharmaceutical, and cell and gene therapy areas. So it's a critical need. Databases are a critical need for the industry. Data, there's a lot of information to support this, such as locations where things may occur and the lot numbers and batches of product. The staff, not only who collect, but who identify and maybe are responsible for the investigations. What type of deviations are we working with? Various types of particulate matter. Also, a mechanism to be able to provide reference materials to support these types of investigations. So there's a lot of information and data that supports an investigation. And, a lot of people may put them in Excel spreadsheets, or they may just cross-reference reports and things like that. But we also have to deal with being able to search this stuff very quickly, very efficiently. And again, I emphasize in a GMP compliant environment where data integrity is very critical. So when we look at the quality control considerations, data integrity, the quality metrics, and digital records and secure access to the information is important as we move forward. So the categories of different types of particulate that we look at are, for example, extrinsic particulate matter, and these are the ones that occur outside the manufacturing process, such as paint, insect parts, hair, and there's a whole array of different types of particles that we will deal with from an environmental standpoint or other sources. Intrinsic particle matter are things that are within the manufacturing process that we expect to see in the process. Stainless steel, glass, rubber, silicone. These are things that are very common to the process and things that again, we not only can identify something as stainless steel, but the various types of stainless steel, or various types of glass, or various types of rubber. But all of these types of things would be in a kind of a known portion of an analytical particle ID database. And then you have inherent particulate matter, and these are things that are part of your product or formulation, such as protein agglomerations or precipitated salts and other types of chemical reactions that occur within your product. And again, these are types of things that need to be characterized, classified, so that we can trend them over time. And we need an efficient way to be able to do those trending. And then one of the most important is known and reference materials. These are things that we can put in as known materials and actually search any unknown material against. The important part of this is we may put a known reference material in, this year, and we may not even be searching that for the next 2 or 3 years. But that goes back to the quality by design. If we are to build a reference database with known materials, it really adds 2 huge values. One is we've got all the materials that could come in contact with our product. That allows us to do very efficient searching, but also it gives us a mechanism for training. It allows our visual inspectors to take a look at the types of particles that they see. We can archive and reference optical pictures and stereo microscopy pictures and other types of things that it allows scientists as well as people associated with particulate to become very familiar with the history of the particle populations within a process without having to go back and put slides on or collect analytical data again. Common types of particulate matter that we deal with routinely, different types of hairs and fibers, glass, metallic fibers, and then also, again, these other types of things that are inherent to the process, Teflon, silicone, protein, precipitated drug products. All of these types of things have their own chemical profiles and their own optical images. And the idea of this program is to be able to take all of this information and put it into one location for easy access and trending that information. So the keys to any really good particulate contamination management life cycle is understanding the phases, right? You need to understand the entire particle management life cycle to be able to effectively perform any type of investigation. The main portions of these are, again, these quality by design initiatives. Set things up so we're not responsive all the time at the end, that we're much more proactive about understanding the things that are going into our product, into our processes, so that there's not a lot of surprises at the end. A good, strong visual inspection program to be looking and finding things that aren't supposed to be there, right? Detection of particulate matter defects. Then the multi-analytical laboratory analysis that provides the multiple different analytical testing that gives you that information you need to make decisions and to look at potential source determinations so that you can very quickly and efficiently provide answers during your investigations. And then the last major phase, obviously, is an impact assessment and how you're going to remediate this action in the future. A lot of times it's very hard to perform remediation if you don't know the source of what the material was. That was your contaminant, hence the real value of a particle ID database. So important considerations also revolve around, regulatory and authorities are concerned about visible particles and container integrity. 100% inspection does not guarantee detection of all defects. So it's important to have these other processes in place to be able to support these types of investigation. So as we look through these, this entire particulate management life cycle is really critical to the success of any program and successful product. And this is just a kind of a quick list. You'll get a copy of this webinar, but these are just a lot of the different guidance documents that reference particulate matter and have some impact on why we do the things we do and what types of information we are looking at as we go through this process. So the key components to a really high quality particulate matter database, and we'll get into an example of the database here in just a second. But we want to make sure that we have a good quality management system with a solid quality backbone so that we can work in a regulated environment. We want to have a way to log in samples and the information associated with those samples. We want to be able to include analytical data, store analytical data of multiple analytical types, and be able to work with that data a little bit. A mechanism to do comparative analysis, so we can look at an unknown and a known sample and put them in a side-by-side fashion, whether it's spectroscopy or whether it's an optical image or an electron microscopy image or other types of things. Really important to get a side-by-side comparison when we're comparing something that may have occurred years apart, but we need to see if there's some trending or some association, and then some mechanism for reporting structure, right? We want to have some degree of templates, some customization of those templates, but also the ability to have audit trails, and so that our conclusions are based on our scientific data. So we'll take an example, and I'll show you an example of each of these here in just a second. But again, here's just kind of an overview again of the process, right? We have login and sample information, which is critical. Results, we need to be able to take all these different types of analytical testing and results and put it into one location. And then also then have the ability to take that data and compare it to other samples and other information so that we can draw some conclusions, and then we'll move on into the reporting phase of the program. So the components that are key for a strong particulate matter database, having things that are allowed to have searchability. Does not need to be spectrally searchable. There's a lot of programs out there that say, hey, if I have an FTIR spectrum, I'll put it in here and search it and see if I can get some of my closest hits. That's a good functionality. However, when we're dealing with these types of materials, we find that we don't typically deal with pure component materials a lot of times. So even in spectral searchable databases, it really just gives us kind of top hits, and we can do some manual comparing and things along those lines. But we really need the ability to search things based on the information and the classifications that we define. So for example, if I define a cellulose particle with a small amount of barium sulfate, I can put that in there as the classification of the material, and then I can just search simply, here's a product I'm looking for that had a particle that contained cellulose with a minor amount of barium sulfate, and then it would give me the different types of results. And I'll show you an example of that. Custom reporting, having the flexibility to how you want to see your data and what it's used for from a trending perspective. Data and spectral comparisons. We want to have that flexibility to pull multiple spectra in, overlay, be able to zoom in, those kind of things. So we'll see that example within the database as well. data visualization. We want to be able to put optical images in, maybe some sizing information, but be able to put things in a side-by-side perspective so we can make some comparisons. Again, customization is important because someone may call something a deviation number. Other people may call it a some other thing as it relates to their investigation. So the ability to be able to customize what you're calling things and how you call things are very important from a company specific perspective. Easily be able to upload data into a database is very important. This is a drag and drop type of program that allows us to just take an analytical spectrum and just drag and drop it into associate it with a particulate sample. So it's very easy to do. You can do it in a matter of seconds. And so data upload is very simple within this process. And then quality attributes, very, very important. 21 CFR 11 compliant. We want to make sure that we have visible audit trails, and I'll show you that within the sample database. And and all the data integrity and data storage and security is critical. So all of these types of things are also, I believe Dennis mentioned, would be coming following this webinar, so that you have information and you can take a look at all of the different types of security that have been put in place as it relates to the database. So on the reporting side of things, we want to be able to, as I mentioned, compile, store, search, and mine analytical data, and be able to have some mechanism to be able to look at these and draw some conclusions based on those. That data management system really is critical when we look at the efficiency of being able to do types of comparisons for foreign particulate matter, and then also being able to provide this documentation for the information, for archiving, saving it with reports, and using it for training functions as we continue through the process. So I'm going to, at this point, show you an example of what the database looks like. It's a very straightforward and very simple looking at the surface. That's the idea, so that the interaction is very simple and intuitive. As we look at the different parts, we have a home page really that just lists, for example, several different types of samples. And then we can also, as I mentioned before, an audit report. So anytime anything is changed with anything related to a sample, we would have something along. And then sometimes you get to this point, which is probably a good example, that from a security standpoint, sometimes we have double verification on this, so we have to log into the system. And this is unplanned, so I apologize. This will only take a second to get back into the system. But again, as we talk about quality control versus just kind of putting things in a spreadsheet or those type of things, this is something that's kind of locked down and is a very secure database to be able to put data into. So that was not planned, but I'm glad it kind of popped up. It kind of shows kind of on the quality side of things that there are these control functions in here. So let's go back over to the audit report, for example. And so this morning I put a few things in, but simply every time something happens within the database here, there is a, so for example, in this particular example, we added optical size, we added optical color, length, an optical description type was all classified. So as we look through those, it does an audit report. And as you might expect for from an FDA requirement, they don't want just the zeros and ones and not be able to view the information. This allows us to create an audit report for every sample. We can put a sample number in, we can put a lab number in, and then we can have dates between what they were doing and have all the information to follow up. There's also a mechanism to add different users. So there's this administrative role to be able to add users and their functions, as well as adding customers. I'm not going to put up the customer portion, unfortunately, just because we have some live customers in there. But also I'm managing fields. So when we talk about sample details and everything, all this stuff is editable. So we can delete or add them, and we can also edit kind of what they're called. So if we go back to the home page, I can show you to add a sample, you simply add sample button, and this is all the information that you would type in, and this would be fed into the database. So this is where essentially we would put all the information for adding a sample in. And from a searchability standpoint, we have the flexibility to, in this particular example, there's about 6 classifications here that are just showing what I can search on, and then it would filter each of these. I can add or subtract whatever I want to sort on by selecting any of the classifications that are related to the sample. So that's a really nice function. It allows us to search on any parameter within the database or any type of classification, but it also allows us to look at the data in a filtered mechanism. So for example, I have it as a sample number, but I can turn that off and put something else back in if I want to into that ability to look at those. So it's a way to sort through things by any of these classifications, whether it be the analytical data or the sample data, or anything for that matter. So, okay. So that's kind of the ability to go through and sort. We have the ability to look at audit reports. We have the ability to manage our users and the fields that we do. From an actual analytical standpoint, if we were to select a particular sample, it'll give all of the sample information for that particular particle. This is sample CI001, and it gives a contract lab sample number, the project number, date it was received, the customer sample name, and all of these things, again, are editable programs. Investigation numbers, non-conformance initiation dates, all these types of things. But we also have information for source details, so we can deal with known samples versus an unknown sample, what facility it came from, departments, drop downs. We also have the ability to look at, functional areas like within the organization where the particulate may have originated from, and then we can also draw conclusions about the particulate that we're looking at, and then some source determination if we do know at the end of the day what that was. So this is really the information about a particular particle that is within the database. And then on the results section, we have the ability then to look at the analytical data that's related to that particle. So for this particular particle, here is a EDS result, just showing carbon as a carbon-based material. We have the ability to normalize or unnormalize the data if we have multiple spectra to look at. We also have electron microscopy images that can be uploaded, and they are as simple as opening up a file and just dropping it into this upload files portion. And then that would add a new sample to the thing, and you just hit save. When we look at adding spectral results right now, the data that we typically use within our system are EDS results, FTIR, optical, polarized light microscopy, Raman, SEM, and stereo microscopy. Those are the things that are most applicable to the things we do as a visible particulate investigation within a pharmaceutical or medical device or biopharmaceutical or cell and gene therapy type of an investigation. We also have things like, here's an FTIR, for example, where we can identify what classification it fits in. So later we can search all cellulose particles, all classifications as cotton or cellulose. But here's an example of a spectrum. And again, it allows us to normalize the data. We can invert the axis. We can zoom in on the data and move it around and look at it, and we can just come back to it. And then so that's an example of the FTIR data. We also have the ability to put in optical images. So we can put multiple optical images for a different particle. So this adds a lot of value because we're able to see, people training can look at this and they can look at what an IR spectrum looks like and what the Raman spectrum looks like, and the optical pictures. Again, polarized light microscopy, which tells us this is an anisotropic particle. So you can add any of the information that you need to add. If we actually do refractive index measurements on this, we can put that information in and again search on that information. And then an SEM, and then stereo microscopy images as well. And you can toggle as many of those as you want to. Now, the nice part about this is I can, for example, set this as a primary sample. So as you see on the bottom now, it says this sample is set to primary. And if I go back out to the database and I sort through different particles, I can select another particle. And then that particle, I can go into the results, and then that would give me my side-by-side comparison information. So as by CI-001 is the primary, I'm comparing it to CI-002. You can see the overlay of the EDS spectra, and I can add as many as I need to. I can, again, normalize that information to look at it. Side-by-side images of the electron microscopy images. Here's my FTIR overlay, where I can, again, normalize spectra. I can invert axis if need be, and also I can zoom up into very particular areas of my overlay and normalize that information. So it's a very functional comparison tool that allows us to compare data in a side-by-side fashion. Here's an example of a particle on the left compared to a particle on the right, are both a clear cellulose-based fibers. And again, we have polarized light microscopy where we can add multiple images for comparison in a side-by-side fashion. And again, the SEM and stereo microscopy images to do the same from a comparison standpoint. So this gives us a lot of functionality to be able to do that. From an action standpoint, then we can also create a report for that, or we can create a comparison report. So for these two examples, we've created a comparison report, and this automatically just generates. It gives the customer sample number, customer name, and all of the information that you have within the comparison. So then this can be taken and put in with the project folder, or be cut and pasted. This isn't a Word document, so you can save it as a PDF, or you can cut and paste it into another function as you're going through. But the idea is that it provides all of the side-by-side information for the PLM, so to give you any analytical text information that you provide, but also then the side-by-side comparison image. Sample A on the left, sample B on the right between the two samples. So it's really a really effective way for us to be able to do comparisons. And it's simple as clearing that, setting something else as the primary sample. And again, it allows us to really do side-by-side comparison in anything that we want to do from an analytical standpoint. So we're really not limited in the types of comparisons that we can do. We're only limited by the data that we're able to get into the database. The other really nice function of this is that there's also a drag and drop for any attachments, reports, overlays, comparisons. Anything can be dropped in here as a Word document, PDF, and then it's locked down within the program. And again, not only is it locked down within the program, but from an audit report standpoint, we can actually see when something has been opened or closed. So that's a really nice function as well. So we'll go back to one of the samples. And then another nice key feature that we really wanted in this is having an image gallery. And this is, again, for training. So we can actually say, okay, we're looking at this particular type of sample. We can look at the optical pictures, the stereo microscopy pictures, and a very quick training tool to be able to look at all these things. So when we look at this from a functionality standpoint, if you have 1, 2, 5 projects where you have some analytical data, it's okay to pull an old report or to look at something and kind of put those in a side-by-side. But when you're dealing with tens of thousands of particles over 500 or 1,000 different projects from one year to the next, you need some mechanism to be able to put all of this in one location. to increase your ability to do searchability, but also to create some data, and that's really what the main value of the database really is. So if we go back to kind of the value of this database, it enables the users to compile, store, search, mine analytical data effectively and efficiently. It optimizes the process of investigating at PM materials. It gives us the ability to create internal laboratory reference collections, as well as using existing databases as we're going through the process. And it's critical to creating a whole data management system for foreign particulate investigation. And it's been really critical to our laboratory as we're going through the final stages here. Estimated that it's going to save about 1 to 2 hours of manual spectral and data search for comparisons to multiple previous projects. So, for example, if we have an unknown particulate and we need to search it back against 3 to 4 other investigations that may have happened over the last year, a lot of the stuff typically in some of these environments is done manually. Using a database saves about 1 to 2 hours in that process. So if you were estimating 500 projects per year, the estimated time savings is between 500 and 1,000 hours, man hours saved going through this process. If you just estimate $100 to $200 per hour with typical rates for an analytical testing laboratory, the total annual savings using the ParticleID database can be as small as $50,000, but upwards of $250,000 potentially in time savings, just by being able to put all of this information, and not just from a financial perspective, but also locking down our information into an environment that meets the data integrity standards that need to be met in a GMP environment, as well as in a CGMP compliant testing environment. So that is an overview of the value of the database, a little bit about why you would use it, a little bit about kind of a return on investment for applying it, and really how to use it in a functional way in an analytical testing laboratory, whether you're manufacturing in pharmaceutical or biopharmaceutical or cell and gene therapy, or whether you're a testing laboratory that provides this information to customers, or whether you're just a process or R&D lab in the material science industries, where you need to keep track of your known materials and what goes in and out of your process. I mean, it can be anything from, a piece of glass floating in a pharmaceutical product all the way to a seed that might be present in a glass manufacturing site, or some sort of a seed in an additive manufacturing company that manufactures metals. Any of these things can utilize a particulate matter database so that this information can be trended and stored in an environment that meets the stricter regulatory requirements. So thank you for your time. My contact information is on here. Antonio Scatina from Gateway Analytical, Director of Sales and Marketing, is also on here, and Sue Blanda from RJ Lee Group. We're welcome to, if you have some data or you want to see an example of how this would really work with your data, those kind of things, just get in touch with Suzanne, and she will arrange for us to do a demo of the system for you, or RJ Lee will. So we've worked very well in the development and the utilization of this database, and I hope that at some point you take the opportunity to at least evaluate it, because it's been a very successful thing in our laboratory environment. Thank you.
Dave, thank you for the information and your great testimonial. We have some questions here. Hopefully that's okay for you. Question one I have is the system CGMP compliant?
It is. It is a GMP compliant system. There is we went through a process, an IQOQ, PQ process of installation for the system, and meets all of the data integrity requirements that we use for our electronic data. So yes, it is.
Okay, thanks. Is the data available immediately for review and comparison once it is entered?
So yes, so this is going to be a cloud-based system. So as soon as the analytical data is uploaded and stored on the database, then it's immediately retrievable to be able to do comparisons. You can also do lifetime comparisons by actually just dragging and dropping files into those little boxes I showed during the demonstration that allow you to just do immediate side-by-side comparisons. But as soon as the actual data is actually uploaded and saved, it's immediately available for any other type of interrogation.
Okay. Here's another one. Can we implement the software across various locations and sites of the same company?
Absolutely. That is really what it's designed for. It is designed so that there can be kind of a parent structure and then other types of databases that all kind of feed and communicate together. That's something that Sue can go into more detail on the structure if you wanted to reach out to her to have questions about that. But the idea of that was one of our bigger requirements when we wanted to do it, because we want to make sure that this database is available to all of our customers if they choose to use it. We want to make sure that they have access to their analytical information that we test at Gateway Analytical so that they can retrieve and do any types of internal types of investigations or reports or anything like that. So the idea of this database was that we would have a mechanism to upload and put all this information into it, but that our customers have a mechanism for being able to access it. So which makes it a system that is very controlled, but allows access to different companies for their particular information. So it would work well across, for example, a company that may have 8 or 10 different locations, they could all share that data.
Okay. Is the database customizable if we want to change something?
Well, it's pretty customizable. So you can choose what analytical data from the choices that we have of what you can put into the database. But it's also from that front end about the information about the samples. You can add or subtract the different types of categories that you want to put in. You can edit what you call them. So there is customizability to the program for sure, but there are some things that aren't customizable. For example, you can't not turn on the audit report. That's just a regulatory kind of thing. There's standard ways to add users on the administrative side, but when we talk about the analytical data end of things, it is customizable.
Okay. Here's one. Will I see the data from Gateway as soon? Oh, I'm sorry. We already asked this one. Is the arrangement for the site agreement through Gateway or RJ Lee Group?
So Gateway Analytical and working through Antonio with our customers certainly have the ability to go through Gateway from kind of logistically to work with RJ Lee, but these things will all go through RJ Lee. RJ Lee is the manufacturer of the software, the seller of the software. So those agreements will all go through RJ Lee Group.
Okay. How quickly can I get access to the site after signing the agreement?
As far as I understand with this, again, that's they could reach out to RJ Lee on that, but I mean the databases are ready to go. The software package is ready to go, so I would suspect within weeks you could be up and running if you decided that it's a tool that would add value to your organization.
I'm hearing I have Sue in the line or on the line with me. She was saying it's next day. So okay.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah. How do the users authenticate? And can we use either MSAD or our own company AD, I'm sorry, how do the users, did I say that right? How do the users authenticate? I think that's right. I'm sorry, I'm a marketing guy. How do users authenticate? Is that that's the question? Okay.
And
Does that make sense?
yeah, on my end, I got to be honest. So Gateway Analytical, we use it as a tool. It's an effective tool for us, but really the software part of it is all run through RJ Lee Group. So that's going to be a question. We'll take that, pass it to Sue, and she can respond to the group from an email after this after the webinar.
Okay. Okay, I think that's what we have time for today. Thank you so much, Dave, and everyone for joining us today. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.